They found her apartment empty but undisturbed, door locked. No signs of struggle, just warm shoes by the entrance and a missing woman who had made one fatal mistake, threatening a royal family 2 days before their arranged marriage was worth billions. 12 months earlier, Talia Coetzee adjusted her Emirates uniform in the crew mirror of Dubai International Airport, checking her reflection with the practiced precision of someone who understood that appearance was currency in this city of golden glass. At 26, she had clawed her way up from serving peanuts in economy class to managing the private charter routes reserved for royalty and oil tycoons. Her blonde hair caught Dubai's eternal sunshine streaming through the terminal's massive windows, and her green eyes held the kind of secrets that came from serving the world's most powerful people at 35,000 feet. She spoke Arabic with a Capetonian accent that charmed her elite clients, who appreciated her discretion almost as much as her efficiency. The glass-walled high-rise in downtown Dubai where she lived was Instagram perfect, all clean lines and designer furniture that she photographed religiously but never truly enjoyed. Her followers saw luxury lunches and sunset views from her balcony, but they couldn't see the growing isolation that came with a life built on other people's money and secrets. Talia had learned to navigate the complex hierarchy of wealth that defined Dubai's social structure. She knew which passengers preferred their champagne chilled to exactly 4 degrees, which oil minister's wife needed her anxiety medication within reach, and which royal cousins weren't speaking to each other this month. But she was unprepared for the kind of attention that would ultimately destroy her. Zayed Al Maktoum Jr. carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone born to unlimited power. At 28, he was the youngest son of one of the UAE's most influential royal families, educated at Oxford, but shaped by traditions that stretched back centuries across the Arabian Peninsula. His dark eyes seemed to hold the weight of ancient deserts and modern expectations, a burden that manifested in the way he moved through the world, careful, calculated, always aware of watching eyes. Unlike his older brothers who embraced the flashy excess of their position, Zayed preferred solitude and books to yacht parties and racing cars. He had disappointed his traditionalist father repeatedly, with his reluctance to embrace the family's more ruthless business practices, but his intelligence and natural charisma made him valuable in ways that frustrated and impressed the old sheikh. In equal measure, Zayed genuinely believed he was capable of love, but his understanding of the emotion was filtered through a lifetime of owning everything he desired. He had been raised to see people as assets to be managed, protected, or eliminated, depending on their usefulness to the family's interests. This worldview would prove fatal for anyone who tried to exist outside his control. The meeting that would seal both their fates happened 37,000 feet above the Swiss Alps. Talia was working the private Boeing 787 charter to Zurich, a route she had flown dozens of times, but never with just 6 passengers. The cabin was a study in understated luxury, cream leather seats that cost more than most people's cars, Persian rugs worth millions, and service that anticipated needs before they were voiced. Zayed sat alone in the forward section, reading Neruda's love poetry in Spanish, while his bodyguard maintained a discreet distance. He ordered mint tea instead of the Dom Perignon that other royals demanded, and when Talia approached to take his meal order, he looked directly at her face, instead of through her the way most powerful men did. Their conversation was brief but different. He asked about her background in Arabic studies, complimented her fluency, and made a comment about her kind eyes being rare at altitude. The interaction felt genuine rather than performative, though she noticed how his bodyguard photographed the crew manifest and made careful notes about their exchange. Even then, warning signs were everywhere for anyone trained to see them. 3 days after the Zurich flight, Talia received a text from an unregistered number asking about coffee. The sender identified himself only as Z, claiming to be resourceful and interested when she questioned how he had obtained her contact information. The first meeting was coffee at a quiet cafe in Jumeirah, chosen because it was far from the royal family's usual haunts. Zayed arrived in a modest BMW instead of his usual convoy, wearing jeans and a simple white shirt that made him look more like a graduate student than a prince. They discussed books, travel, and the strange isolation of lives spent constantly in motion. His laugh carried something hollow when she admitted he wasn't what she had expected from someone of his position. The gifts started small. A first edition of her favorite novel left at the airline's crew desk, Swiss chocolates delivered to her apartment building's concierge. She found poetry books in her flight bag and expensive perfume in her locker, each accompanied by handwritten notes that quoted everything from Rumi to Shakespeare. "You're the only real thing in my manufactured world," he wrote, on elegant stationery that bore no family crest or royal seal. Their midnight drives through Dubai's empty highways became routine, racing through the city while it slept, and the construction lights painted the sky in shades of amber and steel. He showed her rooftop restaurants that required connections to access, private beaches where they walked barefoot in the sand while talking about freedom and the weight of expectations. Talia felt like Cinderella discovering that fairy tales could be real. 6 months into their relationship, the gifts had transformed from romantic gestures into something more calculated. The luxury apartment lease appeared in Zayed's name without explanation, the deed to her Mercedes transferred through a shell, company she had never heard of. When Talia questioned the arrangements, Zayed dismissed her concerns as unnecessary worry about bureaucratic complications. He wanted to protect her, he said, from the complexities of Dubai's legal system. The offshore account arrived with monthly deposits of 50,000 dirhams, money she never requested, but gradually came to depend on. Her Emirates salary seemed insignificant compared to the lifestyle Zayed had created around her, and she found herself trapped between gratitude and growing unease. Each luxury came with invisible expectations, each gift a reminder of her dependence on his generosity. Zayed's questions about her friendships had evolved into subtle manipulation. When her college roommate Sarah planned a visit from Cape Town, Zayed suddenly arranged a weekend in Paris that couldn't be postponed. When her fellow flight attendant Layla invited her to a birthday celebration, Zayed expressed concern about the guest list, the venue, the late hour. He painted her colleagues as jealous of her success, her friends as potentially dangerous influences who didn't understand the delicate nature of their relationship. His requests for her flight schedules became demands disguised as romantic planning. He wanted to coordinate their time together, he explained, to maximize every precious moment. When she flew routes that didn't align with his preferences, mysterious schedule changes would appear in the system. Her supervisors began assigning her exclusively to routes that served his family's business interests, a coincidence that seemed less coincidental with each passing week. The tracking began as protection. Dubai could be dangerous for a woman in her position, he insisted, especially one connected to his family. The security detail that followed her was discreet but constant, their presence justified by vague threats against royal associates. Her phone received new applications that monitored her location, her calls, her messages, all in the name of keeping her safe. Designer clothes appeared in her closet with implicit expectations attached. The flowing dresses and modest necklines reflected cultural standards he claimed to respect, while her own choices drew subtle criticism about appropriateness and respect for tradition. Her social media activity dwindled as he expressed concern about privacy, about the wrong people noticing her lifestyle, about protecting both their reputations. Talia found herself agreeing to these restrictions because the alternative seemed worse. She had fallen so deeply into the fantasy of being chosen by a prince that admitting the truth felt impossible. She wanted to believe his explanations, needed to trust that his control came from love rather than possession. More than anything, she wanted him to choose her over his family obligations, to make their relationship real and permanent. But Zayed lived in constant fear of his father's discovery. Sheikh Hamdan Al Maktoum ruled his family with the same iron. Control he exercised over his business empire, and disappointment was not tolerated. The old man had built his fortune through oil, arms deals, and strategic marriages that cemented political alliances across the Middle East. Every decision served the greater goal of expanding Al Maktoum influence, and personal desires were luxuries that could destroy decades of careful planning. The discovery came through routine surveillance. Palace security monitored all family members as a matter of protocol, and Zayed's regular disappearances had not gone unnoticed. Security footage of his meetings with Talia was compiled into a comprehensive dossier that landed on Sheikh Hamdan's desk during his morning briefings. The confrontation took place in the Sheikh's private office, a temple to power lined with photographs of oil deals, weapons contracts, and royal weddings that had shaped the geopolitical landscape. Hamdan reviewed the surveillance materials with the detached efficiency of a man accustomed to making life-altering decisions based on strategic necessity rather than emotion. His reaction was swift and brutal. The arranged marriage to the Saudi arms dealer's daughter represented billions in defense contracts and oil concessions, a union that would secure the family's influence for generations. Zayed's romantic entanglement with a flight attendant threatened not just the marriage, but the entire network of alliances that supported their empire. The ultimatum was delivered with calm finality. End the relationship immediately, or face disinheritance, exile, and the complete destruction of everything he had been raised to inherit. The family's reputation could not survive the scandal of a royal son choosing a foreign woman over duty, especially not when that choice threatened multi-billion-dollar international agreements. Zayed's confession to Talia came during a private dinner on the rooftop of the Burj Al Arab, the city's lights spreading below them like a carpet of fallen stars. His emotional vulnerability was raw and desperate as he revealed the pressure from his father, the arranged marriage contract, and the threats that hung over his future. He begged her to run away with him to Europe, to abandon everything for a new life together. But Talia had reached her breaking point. The months of control, isolation, and manipulation had stripped away her romantic illusions, leaving only the stark reality of their situation. She refused his proposal with words that cut through his desperation like a blade. If she wasn't enough for him to claim publicly, she told him, then she was nothing more than a convenient secret. Her rejection triggered something darker in Zayed's obsession. His visits became more frequent and unpredictable, his emotional volatility swinging between desperate pleas and barely controlled rage. He appeared at her apartment unannounced, called at all hours, and made increasingly unrealistic promises about defying his father and choosing love over duty. Talia began setting boundaries, refusing his gifts, and reconnecting with the friends she had been systematically isolated from over the past year. Her resistance only intensified his pursuit, and she found herself under constant surveillance by security teams that no longer bothered to remain hidden. Strange cars appeared outside her building, her movements were tracked and reported, and she felt the weight of watching eyes everywhere she went. Sheikh Hamdan's interference extended beyond his son's emotional manipulation. Anonymous warnings reached Talia's supervisors about her involvement with questionable elements. Visa complications appeared in her immigration status, and subtle threats emerged regarding her employment security and her family's safety in South Africa. The pressure campaign was designed to break her resolve, to force her into either submission or flight. But Talia had inherited her own form of stubbornness from the struggles that brought her from Cape Town to Dubai's elite circles. She documented the harassment, made encrypted calls to friends back home, and prepared for the confrontation she knew was coming. Zayed's final ultimatum arrived with the engagement announcement scheduled for the following week. He begged her to disappear with him before the ceremony, to choose their love over the golden cage that trapped them both. But Talia had already made her choice. She would rather lose everything than remain a beautiful secret hidden in the shadows of someone else's life. Talia's apartment buzzed with the quiet hum of central air conditioning when Zayed arrived at 11:30 p.m., 2 days before his engagement announcement would appear in newspapers across the Gulf. He had bypassed building security through methods that spoke of family influence and desperate determination, his usual composed demeanor replaced by something raw and fractured. His hands shook as he paced her living room, the Dubai skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like scattered diamonds on black velvet. The weight of his father's ultimatum pressed down on him with suffocating intensity. Sheikh Hamdan had made his position clear. The Saudi marriage would proceed as planned, and any obstacles would be permanently removed. Talia stood by her kitchen island, still wearing her Emirates uniform from the London flight, that had landed 3 hours earlier. She had known this moment was coming, had felt it building like pressure before a storm. The careful control she had maintained for months finally cracked when she saw the defeat in his eyes. Her ultimatum cut through the tension like a blade, through silk. She demanded he choose between claiming her publicly or losing her forever. The secrecy had become a poison that contaminated everything beautiful about their connection, turning love into something shameful and hidden. She refused to remain a footnote in his privileged life while he married another woman for political convenience. Zayed's response revealed the depth of his weakness. He begged for more time, promised eventual freedom from family obligations, pleaded for her patience with the desperation of someone drowning in expectations he had never chosen, but could never escape. His privileged life had left him unprepared for real sacrifice, unable to conceive of existing without his father's approval and financial support. The argument escalated beyond words into something primal and destructive. Talia's voice rose as she accused him of cowardice, of treating her like expensive jewelry to be hidden away and admired in private. Her South African directness clashed against his cultural conditioning, creating sparks that ignited years of suppressed frustration and unmet needs. When Zayed realized she meant every word about exposure, panic overwhelmed his remaining rationality. His call to Sheikh Hamdan was a surrender, disguised as a plea for help. The final proof that he would always choose family approval over personal integrity. The father's response was immediate and chilling. Keep her contained while professionals handled the situation. Talia's defiant shout echoed through the apartment's marble halls, a declaration that she would not disappear quietly into the shadows of other people's convenience. Her neighbors would later describe the sound as heartbreaking, the cry of someone who had finally found her voice, only to have it silenced forever. The palace security team arrived with surgical precision, their movements choreographed by years of handling delicate family situations. Zayed was escorted away before the real work began, his father ensuring that his son's hands remained technically clean while his conscience would carry the stain forever. Talia fought with the fury of someone who had spent months being systematically diminished and controlled. Her final words carried the weight of absolute condemnation, a promise that their crimes would be exposed even if she could not be there to deliver the testimony herself. Sheikh Hamdan's order came through encrypted channels, his voice steady, with the calm of someone who had made similar decisions before. The family's future depended on eliminating this threat permanently, and personal feelings were luxuries that powerful men could not afford. The cleanup operation unfolded with military efficiency. Professional contractors arrived in unmarked vehicles, carrying equipment designed to eliminate evidence rather than preserve it. They worked through the pre-dawn hours, transforming a crime scene into an apparent voluntary departure. Security cameras throughout the building experienced coordinated malfunctions, their digital memories corrupted by electromagnetic pulses. That left no trace of outside interference. The 2-hour gap from 2:15 to 4:30 a.m. would puzzle investigators, but technical explanations about power fluctuations and system updates provided plausible cover for the impossible. Personal belongings were carefully selected and removed to suggest hasty packing. Expensive jewelry disappeared while everyday items remained, creating the impression of someone fleeing with portable wealth. Her passport and phone vanished, but shoes and handbags stayed behind, telling a story of sudden departure rather than violent removal. The hotel sheet that wrapped her body was industrial-grade cotton, untraceable to any specific establishment. The unmarked vehicle that carried her away had been stolen hours earlier from a construction site. Its GPS disabled and identification numbers filed off. By sunrise, both sheet and vehicle would be reduced to ash in an industrial furnace outside. The city. Building maintenance discovered the anomaly when Talia failed to respond to noise complaints from the previous night. The apartment door remained locked from the inside, its deadbolt engaged through methods that left investigators puzzled about entry and exit routes. The security chain hung uselessly, a detail that would fuel conspiracy theories for years. Dubai Metropolitan Police treated the case as a standard missing person investigation, their questions perfunctory and their interest limited. Missing expatriates were common enough in a transient city, and the lack of obvious violence suggested voluntary departure rather than criminal activity. The scene analysis revealed subtle inconsistencies that trained investigators might have pursued under different circumstances. Talia's shoes remained warm near the entrance, suggesting recent removal, while her coffee cup still held traces of heat. The apartment's air conditioning was set to sleeping temperature, indicating she had planned to spend the night at home. Neighbor interviews produced contradictory statements filtered through fear and financial incentives. Some reported hearing arguments and shouting, while others claimed the evening had been perfectly quiet. The building's security guards provided shifting accounts of visitor logs and surveillance footage, their stories changing with each official inquiry. The mysterious gap in security recordings became the investigation's focal point. Though technical, the experts offered explanations that satisfied bureaucratic requirements, while raising more questions than they answered. Power grid fluctuations, system maintenance, and electromagnetic interference all contributed to the official narrative of technological failure rather than deliberate sabotage. Within 72 hours, the missing person case was quietly transferred to inactive status, filed away with hundreds of similar disappearances that Dubai's authorities preferred not to examine too closely. The city's reputation for safety and luxury could not survive too much scrutiny of its darker undercurrents. Emma Coetzee stepped off the Emirates flight into Dubai's gleaming terminal, her world shattered by a phone call that had changed everything. Her younger sister had vanished without explanation, leaving behind only questions and an apartment that told no coherent story. The official missing person report felt sanitized, stripped of details that might actually lead somewhere meaningful. Dubai Metropolitan Police Headquarters buzzed with the efficient indifference of bureaucracy processing another expatriate disappearance. Detective Rahman treated Emma's concerns with practiced sympathy while delivering the standard explanation: voluntary departure, missing documents, no signs of criminal activity. The case files remained frustratingly thin, filled with procedural notes that said nothing about where Talia might have gone or why. Emma's requests for security footage met with technical explanations about system malfunctions and data corruption. Witness interviews had produced nothing useful, she was told, just conflicting accounts from neighbors who might have heard raised voices or might have imagined them entirely. The building's security guards provided statements so generic they could have applied to any night in any building. What struck Emma most was the silence. No media coverage existed, despite Talia's prominent position with Emirates and the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. International missing person cases usually attracted some attention, but every journalist she contacted claimed editorial disinterest or insufficient evidence for publication. Emirates management expressed corporate sympathy while hiding behind confidentiality policies that protected employee privacy, even when those employees had vanished. Talia's colleagues spoke carefully about her recent months, mentioning expensive gifts and increasing isolation, but their willingness to elaborate evaporated when supervisors reminded them about discretion clauses in their contracts. The South African consulate offered diplomatic platitudes wrapped in genuine powerlessness. Cultural sensitivities and jurisdictional limitations created convenient barriers to meaningful assistance, while Emma sensed undercurrents of fear in every official interaction she encountered. Hassan al-Qasimi marketed himself as Dubai's most discreet private investigator, promising results where official channels had failed. His initial enthusiasm produced quick discoveries: financial records showing Talia's connection to luxury purchases, social media analysis revealing her association with wealthy local circles, and witness accounts of her relationship with someone from an influential family. But al-Qasimi's progress stalled as his investigation approached sensitive territory. Key witnesses began refusing to speak with him. Security footage disappeared from building archives, and anonymous warnings arrived at his office with increasing frequency. His decision to withdraw from the case came wrapped in professional advice about investigations that led to places where foreigners could face unexpected visa complications. Marcus Webb had built his reputation investigating financial corruption among Gulf royalty, specializing in stories that required bulletproof evidence to survive legal challenges and political pressure. His interest in missing person cases stemmed from patterns he had observed. Inconvenient people who disappeared when their existence threatened powerful interests. Webb's attention focused on Talia's case after receiving anonymous digital fragments that suggested Palace involvement in her disappearance. The encrypted email contained timestamp data, vehicle identification numbers, and cryptic references to cleanup operations that aligned with his previous investigations into royal family problem-solving methods. His research methodology involved following financial breadcrumbs through shell companies and contractor networks. Palace security operations hid behind multiple layers of corporate protection, but money always left trails for investigators, patient enough to trace complex ownership structures back to their sources. Webb's breakthrough came through sources within Dubai's expatriate security community, former contractors who carried grudges against employers who discarded them after sensitive assignments. Some possessed evidence that could expose systematic criminal activity by people who considered them completely disposable. The source who finally agreed to meet identified himself only as Khalid during their clandestine encounter in a Sharjah parking garage. His motivation combined guilt over past participation in morally questionable operations with fear for his family's safety if his continued silence protected people who viewed him as a permanent liability. Khalid's evidence was comprehensive and devastating. Body camera footage showed a shrouded form being loaded into an unmarked vehicle at 3:17 a.m., corresponding exactly to the mysterious gap in building security recordings. Audio captures included voices giving orders in Arabic, with distinctive speech patterns that voice analysis could potentially match to known individuals. Vehicle documentation traced the transport to shell companies that existed solely to provide untraceable assets for sensitive operations. GPS logs revealed routes from residential areas to industrial facilities equipped with high-temperature furnaces capable of eliminating physical evidence completely. The revelations extended far beyond Talia's disappearance. Khalid's files documented similar operations over 3 years, creating a pattern of systematic elimination, targeting romantic inconveniences, business rivals, and potential whistleblowers. The scope suggested institutional capability rather than isolated criminal acts. Digital preservation required careful planning to protect evidence from destruction. Khalid had distributed encrypted copies across multiple international servers, protected by automated systems that would release everything if his security protocols failed to receive regular updates. His paranoia reflected realistic assessment of the risks he faced. His cooperation demanded international protection guarantees that reflected his understanding of the consequences. 3 other contractors from similar operations had died in apparent accidents over 18 months, a coincidence rate that suggested systematic elimination of potential witnesses. Webb faced ethical complexities that transcended normal journalistic decisions. Publishing would expose systematic murder by regional power brokers, but would guarantee retaliation against everyone involved in the revelation. The evidence was solid, but the targets possessed diplomatic immunity and unlimited resources for suppressing inconvenient truths. Within days of their meeting, Khalid's life began unraveling with surgical precision. Immigration irregularities appeared in his documentation, employment records vanished from official databases, and financial accounts faced freezing orders pending investigation. His family received anonymous educational consultations about their children's school security arrangements. The race between exposure and elimination had begun, with truth competing against power in an environment designed to favor those with unlimited resources and complete disregard for inconvenient lives. Webb's legal team worked through the night assembling documentation for international publication, coordinating with media outlets in London and New York, where Gulf influence carried less weight. The story required careful structuring to survive, inevitable legal challenges, with every claim supported by multiple sources and technical verification of digital evidence. But Sheikh Hamdan's intelligence network had already identified the threat. Palace security contractors monitored Webb's communications, tracked his source meetings, and compiled dossiers on everyone involved in the investigation. The response was swift and multifaceted, targeting every aspect of Webb's professional and personal life simultaneously. Legal injunctions arrived from multiple jurisdictions, claiming defamation and national security violations. International publishers faced pressure from Gulf advertisers and business partners, whose contracts included subtle clauses about editorial content affecting regional relationships. Webb's visa status suddenly required review by immigration authorities, who discovered previously overlooked irregularities in his documentation. His attempts to protect Khalid's identity failed as palace security systematically eliminated potential sources. The former contractor's family was relocated overnight after receiving death threats, while Khalid himself disappeared during what authorities described as a routine traffic stop that somehow produced no documentation or witness accounts. Within 72 hours, Webb's digital archives had been corrupted by sophisticated cyber attacks that penetrated multiple security layers. His backup drives were stolen during a break-in that left expensive equipment untouched, and cloud storage providers experienced technical failures that coincidentally affected only his accounts. The story died before publication, taking with it the only evidence of Talia's fate. Webb himself vanished from Dubai 2 days later, his departure so sudden that colleagues found his office coffee still warm. Immigration records showed normal exit procedures, but passengers on his supposed flight to London reported seeing no one matching his description. The journalist who had spent years exposing Gulf corruption became another unexplained disappearance in a region where asking the wrong questions carried permanent consequences. Meanwhile, Zayed's rehabilitation unfolded with clockwork precision in the pristine facilities of a Swiss mental health clinic. Palace press releases spoke of exhaustion from royal duties and the pressures of modern leadership, painting his absence as responsible self-care rather than enforced exile. International media praised the royal family's progressive approach to mental wellness. His engagement ceremony proceeded in Doha with spectacular opulence, broadcast across Gulf networks as a celebration of traditional values and international cooperation. The Saudi bride brought arms-dealing connections worth billions in defense contracts, while oil concessions cemented Al Maktoum influence across the peninsula. Zayed appeared beside his new wife with the composed demeanor of someone who had successfully compartmentalized recent traumas. Palace public relations orchestrated his return to Dubai as a transformed leader committed to charitable works and modernization efforts. Photographs showed him opening hospitals, funding education initiatives, and speaking eloquently about women's rights and social progress. The irony was lost on audiences who had never heard Talia's name or learned about her fate. Economic benefits flowed immediately from the successful marriage alliance. Billion-dollar infrastructure contracts were signed, joint ventures launched new regional development projects, and the Al Maktoum family's political influence expanded through carefully cultivated relationships with international partners who valued stability over uncomfortable questions about human rights. Talia's existence was systematically erased from all accessible records. Her Emirates employment history was archived beyond public reach, her social media accounts deleted for violating unspecified terms of service, and her apartment lease was quietly transferred to new tenants who knew nothing about their predecessors. Emma continued her fight for justice from Cape Town, establishing an advocacy organization for families of missing persons in the Gulf region. Her efforts attracted support from international human rights groups, but diplomatic realities limited concrete progress. The Al Maktoum family's economic importance to global partners made aggressive intervention politically impossible. Her work revealed a pattern of systematic silencing that extended far beyond her sister's case. Powerful men across the region routinely eliminated inconvenient women whose existence threatened family honor or business interests. The disposability of foreign workers, particularly women in service industries, created a vulnerable population that could disappear without generating significant investigation. Digital-age surveillance systems that promised security had been weaponized for concealment. The same technologies that tracked every movement and communication also provided tools for selective erasure, allowing evidence to vanish and witnesses to be neutralized with unprecedented efficiency. International business interests enabled these injustices through willful blindness to their partners' methods. Arms deals, oil contracts, and development projects generated profits that made uncomfortable questions about human rights economically inconvenient for multinational corporations and their government sponsors. 3 years later, Talia officially remained missing, her case filed among thousands of unresolved disappearances that Dubai authorities had stopped actively investigating. Zayed lived as a respected royal family member, father to 2 young children whose photographs appeared regularly in society magazines celebrating Gulf modernization. Sheikh Hamdan's legacy thrived through expanding business empires and political influence that stretched across continents. His reputation for decisive leadership attracted international partners who valued results over methods, ensuring continued prosperity for the Al Maktoum dynasty. But Emma's advocacy had created underground networks of truth-tellers who documented disappearances and preserved evidence beyond the reach of palace contractors. Their work remained hidden, waiting for political winds to shift toward accountability rather than accommodation. In Dubai's Golden Towers, some secrets are buried deeper than the desert sand, but truth has a way of surfacing when the wind shifts. Talia's story lived on in encrypted files and careful whispers, a testament to the cost of challenging power and the courage required to seek justice in a world designed to protect the guilty.